Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest, somebody I've been kind of following, and I was curious about this book when it was published back in 2017. The title of the book is The Led Zeppelin Curse, Jimmy Page and the Haunted Boleskine House. I've read through it. It's an excellently, very well-researched inquiry into Jimmy Page and this curse that surrounds Zeppelin, and also the Boleskine House, which is burned down, I think, since the book was published. Maybe it was burned down before. But the author, Lance Gilbert, is coming to us from New Zealand, and he's taken time out of his schedule to talk about this book. So, Lance Gilbert, are you there?
Yes, indeed. Hey, thanks for having me on, William. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for agreeing to the interview. For people who may not have heard of this book, The Led Zeppelin Curse, Jimmy Page and the Haunted Boleskine House, can you talk about your background and what led you to write the book?
Oh, sure. So in my early 20s, and I suppose much like Jimmy Page, I had an interest in the occult. I was curious to see if that stuff existed. There wasn't any really negative intent on my part at that age. It was more exploratory. I wanted to see if those nefarious things existed in the shadows. Some asked me, well, why didn't you try to summon angels? And quite honestly, I didn't know the answer to that, except that I wanted something that was a bit more edgy, a bit more dangerous. And I always use the analogy of a shark cage. Being in a shark cage as the magic circle, and having this imminent death on the outside and the thrill of it. And now that I look back on it, it's pretty foolhardy. I'm lucky I'm still here because I did knock on some doors that opened, and in ways I didn't expect. And I suppose the positive end of that is that I did learn quite a bit, at least from my perspective, on how those realms operate. And I say that from my perspective because everyone, views or experiences these things through a different lens, or not at all. So I'm not going to be someone that says this is how it is. That's a red flag for me. But I used that experience or that knowledge to interpret, to the best of my ability, what I think might have happened with Jimmy Page and his interest in magic, because he's been notoriously tight-lipped about it. And to his credit, because every time he mentions magic or someone asks him, it's usually the comments are parsed, it's taken out of context, and it makes him look like he's kind of this wacky person, and it's pissed him off over the years, so he just keeps quiet about it. To my benefit, I can then take all of that lack of information and interpret it through my own lens. And that's what I did with the book.
Right. And so he has an interest in all types of Western esotericism, but a lot of the people don't ask him the right questions either. They don't seem to have an inquiry into magic. So you took your magical background and knowledge and applied it to this book. How did you see his magical practices within the context of the group Led Zeppelin?
That's a great question. It's really hard to know. I think he wanted to take the pre-existing success of the band and then see if he could imbue it with magic, and see if he could somehow amplify that success, or just to kind of, do something and then step back and then see where it took them, and see if he could observe the effects. And I think he was just playing in a very curious way, with something that fascinated him on the side. The guy had obviously music was his life, but he had a side interest, and he wanted to see if he could meld the two, I suspect. And with these things, you can have some unintended consequences that cannot definitively scientifically be traced back to the point of origin. So it's impossible to say what he did had A action had this reaction, B reaction. It's impossible to say exactly. There's no straight line between action and reaction or effect with magic. It's because it's happening behind the veil. All you can see is something happens in this realm, it goes under the surface to another realm, and then it might pop up in a certain manifestation. And then the only conclusion you can draw is maybe because you did this happened. And I think that's where the issues came up with the band and all of the negative things that occurred, 1975 forward.
Right. And so, I mean, I think I remember that he had read Crowley's Magic and Theory and Practice at a very early age. And you also kind of have a quote of his that I remember, as he said that Led Zeppelin his magical work was a fusion of music and magic. So I think he really saw the music as an outgrowth of his magical practices. Your first chapter of your book is Crowley's Page. So can you talk about the connection between Aleister Crowley and Jimmy Page?
Sure. I mean, that was a little play on words. Crowley's Page being his, page boy, if you will.
Right.
That was my own little fun with that. Yeah, I mean, Jimmy said he came across that big, really thickly coded book, Magic and Theory and Practice. I think it was either 11 or 15. It's been so long. I want to make sure I get my details correct. So any Zep heads out there, anyone that's picking up on something, it's been a while, and I've moved on to different projects. But Jimmy was exposed to the book very young, and he never was really specific about exactly how it came into his hands. But certainly it started his dialogue with magic, and not just specifically with ritual magic, Western, but everything. He really explored quite a bit because he was just someone that was always searching and curious. He became fascinated with Crowley. Do what thou wilt have an effect in his. That was Crowley's phrase that was quite famous, and it was basically to Page just meant, do your true will, do what makes you happy. Other people interpret it differently, but from Jimmy's perspective, it was just find what makes you happy and do it. And by doing that, you're going to have a positive effect on those that you encounter afterwards, because you're not a miserable accountant. No offense to accountants out there, but if you're a miserable accountant and you're always this grumbly kind of sour person, that's not going to really have a good effect on people you encounter. But if you find what makes you really happy, other people are just going to want to resonate with that and go, wow, what do you do? Why are you so positive and happy? Because I find what makes me happy, and I'm fortunate enough to pursue it. So Jimmy, I'm pretty sure it's Led Zeppelin 3. That was Jimmy's coming out when he had Crowley phrases put on the runout groove of the master. So do what thou wilt, and so mote be it, which is a magical phrase. Then it went to Zeppelin 4 with the symbols. Funny story, I was doing some research just last night, and boy, Jimmy's interviews are really interesting, because depending on what the person asks, I know he'll look at them kind of sideways and go, okay, what is this person going to spring upon me? This guy, he asked Jimmy about Zoso, the sigil or symbol. And I'm like, oh no, Jimmy's going to get really pissy and start snapping at him, because he does that sometimes in interviews. And sure enough, Jimmy must have liked this guy, because the way he answered it was a very, a very oblique answer that went all over the place. And he said, look, it's a sigil that, or a symbol, that it was almost like a stamp, like craftsmen used back in the ancient times. They put their stamp or their, the stamp of their work that represented them. That's all he really said. And then at the end, Jimmy kind of laughed, and he said, are you satisfied with that evasive answer?
Right.
And so Jimmy knew what he was doing. I was waiting for him to talk about it, and he just kept talking around the answer. And I'm like, oh, he's doing it again. And then he finally circled back and did that whole laugh thing with, hey, I did that on purpose. And the interviewer didn't probe further, which is good.
No, it's interesting, because I've seen him question that on French TV. He also did, I think, a Cambridge interview. So he knows all this stuff, but he doesn't explain it. But you explain in your book that Zoso symbol goes back to the Dragon Rouge, which is kind of like an old grimoire. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. It goes way back, and it's been around for quite a while. However, with my interpretation, and I think from some stuff I've read, you can take a symbol or a sigil, and what you do is you personalize it. You can take something that might have had a general representation, and then you personalize it by imbuing it through your thoughts and through your actions, or whatever you want to practice magically. This is a sigil I've taken. It's a general template, and then I've imbued it with my intention, my goal for it, and then he puts it all over the amplifiers and Bonham's drums. It's everywhere. And for me, I think he imbued it with his own personal, intention. So it wasn't just what it represented back in the ancient times. So he took that, but of course, he famously never told anyone what it meant to him. Supposedly, he told Robert Plant this when they were both drunk, and then Plant forgot. And then Plant asked him, "Hey, can you tell me what it meant?" And he said, "Oh, geez, why did I do that? We're both hammered, and I shouldn't have told you. So no, I'm not going to tell you." So from there, Jimmy's never told anybody what it meant to him because I think it will deflate the magical power behind it.
Right. So, and you talk about sigil magic in your book, and the so what he's doing. I think in the Dragon Rouge, it was Zoso was corresponded to Saturn, so it may have been some kind of Saturn meaning, but who knows? But it definitely is very mysterious. But that wasn't the only thing that he really covered himself with. He had kind of a magic dragon outfit and all kinds of symbols on his clothes as well. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and I think, and then once again, this is my theory. I mean, I really preface in the book, hey, look, this is my interpretation because Jimmy never talks. This is my take on it. And still, some people will say, "Oh, this isn't true. You can't prove it." I said, "Look, I'm not trying to prove it. It's just an idea." And Jim, the only time Jimmy's ever mentioned anything at all about his magical practice was talismanic magic, which is using sigils and symbols. The only time, and I know the article because I found it. The only time he was very specific about his practice, and it was talismanic magic. So we know on record that Jimmy has said he does practice that, which can take many forms. So running with that, the dragons all over his suits, I think it was a form of magical protection. The dragons came out after Jimmy started collaborating with Kenneth Anger. Jimmy's never commented on it, so I can't be proven wrong here. But my theory is that he put those dragons all over him to protect himself, because talismanic magic can protect you, deflect things, or it can draw good things to you. And there's the whole discussion around what's an amulet and what's a talisman, but they tend to cross over a bit depending on the magical tradition. But I think the dragons were there as a protection from Kenneth Anger and his salvo of rage that came at him because Jimmy didn't complete the soundtrack.
Right. He didn't complete the soundtrack for Lucifer Rising. He was the original artist. And I think he had met Kenneth Anger on one of his journeys to buy a bunch of Crowley stuff. I think Cole was the name of the manager for Led Zeppelin. And he talked about Jimmy always traveling around trying to buy all of Crowley's amulets, implements. I think he's the largest collector of Crowley regalia in the world, if I remember, my memory serves me correct.
He's got the bucks for it, so I'm sure if he can get it, if he can get his hands on it, I'm sure he'd buy it. He knows that these things have magical power and potentially access to those realms. Objects can easily, I think, open doorways to other realities. So yeah, I'm sure Jimmy's tried to obtain as much as he could in regards to objects and manuscripts, books, etc. That Crowley actually owned himself. And then he met Anger in 1971 at a Sotheby's auction of Crowley artifacts, and that's how they struck up their so-called friendship.
Right, and so then, but he wasn't. Page wasn't just a collector of items. He collected what's on the cover of your book is Boleskine House. Can you talk about Boleskine and why that was important to Crowley and Page?
Oh, sure. So Crowley inherited quite a bit of money. He came from a brewing family, and I think they were Plymouth Brethren, so a religious sect. I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
He was exclusive brethren. He was a subset of the Plymouth Brethren.
Ah, okay.
Right.
And he inherited quite a bit of money when his dad died, and that's kind of when he turned supposedly to this kind of negative course of action. It's just, hey, you lose a parent, of course it's going to sour you a bit. But in any event, that triggered Crowley going on a magical path and really testing the boundaries of what was appropriate in Edwardian times. Anyway, he wanted to perform a ritual called the Abramelin ritual, which supposedly, and I have never researched it too extensively. I kind of stay away from any specifics around that stuff, and for a good reason, because I just, I stay on the periphery, but I don't get too specific about any of that for just to keep myself out of it. But he wanted to practice this ritual. I think it takes 6 months to a year. You have to fast, no alcohol, et cetera, et cetera. So he chose Boleskine House as the perfect location to conduct this ritual. He had the money to buy it from his inheritance. And then he made some changes to the property so that he could be positioned just so, per the Abramelin, instruction. So he bought Boleskine, I think, in 1899, and started the ritual. And then MacGregor Mathers was in Paris, a member of the Golden Dawn, and he summoned Crowley to help him because there was infighting in the Golden Dawn, if I'm correct. Crowley broke off from that, and he didn't finish the ritual. He basically summoned all this stuff, these whatever you want to call them, and just took off and left them to kind of stew about the property. And then when he came back, that stuff was too entrenched, and he couldn't get rid of it. And he actually himself fled the property because once that stuff gets there and it's there too long, you can't banish it. So yeah, that was Crowley's interest in the property. And then Jimmy Page, found out it was for sale, and bang, he snapped it up in 70 or 71. I've been trying to get my hands on the property transfer deeds. The people that currently own Boleskine say 71. I'm sure they have access to those documents. So we're going to say he bought it in 71, and then owned it until 92.
Yeah. There's a picture of him right there in the front. It's just a one-story property, but it's located right over Loch Ness. And Crowley thought it was the perfect example, north, south, east, west, so he could perform this ritual. And he said that like entities were floating around there. And then one of the guys went crazy and tried to kill his wife and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of not good thing. And I think the Skene references a church, right? Wasn't there some legend that a church was on the property and then it burnt down with parishioners or something? Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes. I think it was the 1600s. I'm not sure. Late 16, early 1700s. And there was a kirk. They call it a Scotland kirk or church on the property. And the legend is that it burned down during mass. Everyone was locked inside and it burned down. There's no documentation to prove that, but it's a legend that is perpetuated. And of course, all that trauma energy on a piece of land, all those people dying in one concentrated spot, can really have an effect on the veil, I think, between realms and a location. So supposedly, Boleskine House was built, over the ashes, if you will, of that burnt down church, built by the Fraser family. Fraser family is very famous in Scotland. One of the Frasers built it as a hunting lodge, and then they slowly added on to make it more of a home, and then it went from there.
It went from there, and then when did it burn down? Do you remember what year that was?
When I was writing this book, or when I was doing research on it, let me think here. I know it burnt down a second time in 2019. After it was purchased by Keith and Kira Reddy. I'm trying to think of the first burn down period. I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken, in December. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I should know this, but it's been so long. I think it was 2015 that it burned down. And then I did all the research on the book and started writing it in 2016, released it 2017. So I'm pretty sure it was December 2015 was the first time it burned down. And it caught fire mysteriously. I don't think they've ever determined exactly what happened, except that a Dutch woman, a wealthy Dutch businesswoman, owned the house, and her daughter, as a vacation home. So her daughter and her boyfriend were there at the time, and they had been shopping, and then there was some electrical fire. But the fire brigade can't confirm exactly what happened, so it's listed as a mystery event.
So it's a second burnt down within 4 years. And then I think the current owners are Thelemites, right? They're trying to restore it through crowdfunding. Is that correct? Do you know?
Yes. I've been following them pretty closely. They're land developers. I think Kira's an attorney. Keith is, yes, he studies, Thelema. And I think also sorts of other religion. He's got a degree in comparative religion, I believe. So they're really, smart people. They're intellectuals. How deep they are into Thelema, I don't know. But they're rebuilding it, and they have approval to put, I think it's 10 little holiday homes, almost like hotel units in the property. I think to raise money and to keep the place funded so that they can do tours. And I can imagine the security around it, because somebody crazy guy, lit the place on fire in 2019 as they were restoring it, which is a real blow to their efforts. And I can imagine, how frustrating that would be. So I'm sure they've got it really locked down now, to keep it safe.
And that wasn't the only property that Page was interested. My understanding is he was curious about Crowley's Abbey of Thelema as well. Is that correct? Do you know?
Yeah, yeah, that was a really neat story. I had to do quite a bit of digging on. So in 1975, the band they were on holiday in Greece, and it was the Plant family, Page family, and believe Benji Lefebvre, if I'm pronouncing his name right. He was the vocal assistant for Plant and also one of the engineers. So basically, the families are in Greece, they're on holiday. Jimmy decides to break off and for like a 2-day jaunt over to Sicily to go check out the Abbey of Thelema, which was Crowley's commune back in the 20s. And this place was just dilapidated at the time. Supposedly, two brothers had owned it together. One was a communist, one was fascist, and they hated each other.
Right.
So
They built a wall in between one half of the
I think
property and the
so.
other. They hate each other. Yeah.
Oh, so funny family. Yeah, Jimmy was told about the property. I think when he had met with Kenneth Anger because they had a few sessions. He might have known about it ahead of time, but I think Anger had encouraged him or had kind of lit the fire, if you will, to say, "Hey, go check out this property." Once again, the magical power associated with it, I think, drew Jimmy in. So he went and he checked it out during this trip to Greece. Sure enough, I've researched it up and down, inside and out, and from what I understand, while they were at the Abbey, that's when Robert Plant got into really bad car accident on the countryside in Rhodes, Greece. Bad injury for him. His leg just shattered. His kids were injured. His wife had bad head injuries. The only person that escaped was Scarlett Page, and she was in the back seat along with the Plant children. She didn't have a scratch on her supposedly, which I find interesting. And she's wonderful. She's a photographer, and I follow her a bit, and she just seems like such a nice person. Um, really nice lady. She's around my age in her 40s, late 40s. But anyway, yeah. So she wasn't injured. So who knows? Maybe she had some sort of protection through her dad, or it was just by chance. Who knows?
But that was like one element of the Led Zeppelin curse was that car accident, right? And then Page's son Carmack, I think he passed away 2 years later. Is that correct? 73? Can't remember.
77, right
77,
before
sorry.
they were in New Orleans and they just had left the Oakland show, and that's when he found out in New Orleans, and just it's tragic. I mean, it's a compelling story. It's a tragic story. There's all these, I do not take that lightly. And I try to write about it in as sensitive as a way as possible. I can only imagine. So, but a lot of folks will, when I see this written up online, they'll conveniently say that Anger did his curse in 75. He really supposedly cursed Page or said he would curse him in 76. So, but Jimmy had agreed to do the soundtrack for Lucifer Rising in about 72, if I get it right. And once again, back in the 70s, there's not a whole lot of exact information on it, just talk, and some people have different details. So he agreed to do this in 72-ish, and just didn't get around to doing it. He ended up getting, from his Anger says he did 20 minutes out of the 40 minutes that he agreed to do. Jimmy says that in an interview he did 31 minutes, but either way, he didn't get the 40 minutes that Anger wanted specifically, and so Anger was hounding him to get it done. Jimmy became addicted to heroin. I think Anger's progressive frustration over waiting for this guy to do this music had started to affect the band, even though there was no official curse. And I think that might have had an effect on the Robert Plant and his accident. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. Some people just say, hey, that's just life, and it happens. And I can agree with that as well. So who knows?
But yeah, so I mean, they had the curse. Bonham passed away in 1980. So they had to definitely that was the end of the band in 80. But it wasn't a lot of their. If you look at a lot of the lyricism, even "Stairway to Heaven" or you had "Houses of the Holy," there's definitely some kind of occult references there. Correct?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. There's stuff in there that refers, and people can interpret in different ways. I just honestly think Jimmy had no malevolent intent. He was, he was addicted to drugs, and they were touring, and they had such a wild life. I think he was just playing, just to see, what would happen. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, and I think in hindsight, he probably, I think he once went on record to say it was regrettable that he had such an intense interest in Crowley. 'Cause I'm pretty sure he's reflected on it and connected the dots that something, in his involvement with magic might have reverberated on the band. I'm sure he wouldn't say anything publicly, but I know he's reflected on it. And he said it was regrettable. So he knows that, something was set into motion by that, but I don't think it's his fault per se.
Right. I mean, I think that Anger called "Stairway to Heaven" the most evil song that he'd ever heard, because the potency of the occult references. But you say, like, you write, quote, "Houses the Holy" in yours. I mean, can you talk? You have a chapter on music or music as ritual. Can you talk about like the ritual elements of their music?
It's been a while, so
Concert
specifically, but with the concerts, I mean, Jimmy would always do this violin bow solos, which were really cool. I mean, they sounded amazing, and just visually, what a great element to their performance. And he does this ritual where he is calling the corners, and it's kind of a north, south, east, west. He's like creating this magical space on stage with the violin bow, using it as a magic wand. It's something on YouTube there. I mean, it's pretty obvious to anyone that has is the slightest bit open-minded that he's doing something, whether he's just playing or doing it theatrically and with no intent. Who knows? But he knew that the energy in those stadiums and those auditoriums, all that electrical. I mean, people's minds are these radios. There's an electrical charge there. And all of that focus on him at one specific point on stage, he catches it, and then he can direct that energy, and to what intent. Who knows what he had? But he was playing with all this energy that he had access to, in those venues with all of those people. I mean, I can imagine the rush. I mean, those guys said that they would just be high for days just off the charge of being in, at the center of all of that. So it's definitely a real thing and quite palpable, I'm sure. So. Yeah, I mean, the ritual extent, he often did that, that whole calling of the corners with his violin bow. He also used the theremin, which is a really interesting instrument, and that he used that on stage with Robert Plant. They did this whole back and forth thing, and the song remains the same. They did that. It was a really, really good performance. But yeah, he definitely played with energy and music on stage to open portals and just to see what would happen, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think that's a good reference, is that their documentary, The Song Remains the Same, because I think he reenacts the hermit ascending the mountain that's in kind of the classic tarot card, right? And I think that he's also been seen in pictures kind of emulating this hermit. So I think it represents kind of wisdom. So he's on that path of climbing a mountain. So you just see more and more esotericism of Jimmy Page the more you look at it.
100%, William. And once again, I'm not defending him. I just think, from my perspective as a young man looking back and the stuff and what was my mindset playing with that stuff, it was just tinkering around to see what was real, what wasn't, and what I could experience. By all means, looking back, wow, okay, really foolish stuff, because now I know for me it's real. But also just I can only imagine that Jimmy was kind of doing the same type of thing, like many, usually it's young men. I think women intuitively know to stay away from those things by and large, but I think men have a bit of a blind spot when it comes to that, so they have to actually trip and fall before they realize they shouldn't be doing this, whereas women might go, I'm not going to even attempt it. I can sense there's something not right with this. I'm generalizing, but I think that's the case. It's usually young men.
Right. No, I tend to agree with you. I think that there's a little bit more willingness to, court danger. I don't think women are.
Yeah.
Which is why men die earlier than women. They die of
Yeah.
accidents, all kinds of stuff.
More reckless for sure.
What other elements kind of typify the Led Zeppelin curse in their history?
Well, there's another stream of the curse, William, where, and I don't really believe this one as much, but there are stories that Jimmy had tried to get all the band members together to perform a ritual at Boleskine House to amplify their fame and fortune. And supposedly John Paul Jones, the practical one, wanted nothing to do with it. So supposedly it was just Bonham, Robert Plant, and Jimmy did a ritual together to ensure fame and fortune. And supposedly that was the part of the reason why all of these things befell the band afterwards. Who knows? Maybe they did something. I don't know, but I think that it has to do with Kenneth Anger firing Jimmy Page from the Lucifer Rising project, calling his press conference. He was quite a theatrical guy. But cleverly so, because when you do something theatrically and you call attention to yourself and you tell these reporters, hey, listen to me, he knew the reporters would then put that information out there. But by spreading the information and getting other people to read these stories, their minds would be vibrating, thinking these things, and then that would just kind of ricochet, which would actually create the magical energy of it. So Anger was clever in that sense. But once he fired Jimmy from the project, and then he said, you know what, I'm going to throw a Kenneth Anger curse. And then, who knows if he did one curse ritual or many. Jimmy in interviews when he's asked about it, he says, oh, it's a shame because Ken was so talented, but he just lost the plot. So he didn't say anything bad about Ken. But Ken didn't, it took him a while to get Lucifer Rising out there because the soundtrack wasn't finished. But then again, Jimmy never finished the music. I mean, and that's the one thing that if he had just finished the music, I mean, if you were Ken and you were waiting for this like rock star who on a gentleman's agreement said he would do 40 minutes of music for your movie, and he waited years and years and nothing, he didn't finish the music, I would be upset too. I would be frustrated with the guy. Like, why couldn't you follow through? And I think that's a question people don't ask Jimmy Page, and Jimmy's never answered to the best of my knowledge. So I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it was Bobby Bouzoulet actually finished it up from jail, I think, is what happened. Went back to Bobby.
Yeah. But Bobby and Ken.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting aspect of the Manson family, often overlooked, is the connection to Kenneth Anger through Bobby Bouzoulet. But Page also owned an occult bookstore. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So it was called the Equinox, and it was Equinox was named after one of Crowley's publications. I think he did a quarterly. I'm not quite sure, but it was named after one of Crowley's.
His encyclopedia was called the Equinox.
There you go. That's it. And so obviously, named it after Crowley and his work. And he supposedly couldn't find all of the occult titles that he wanted, all of the books he wanted. So someone suggested, why don't you open your own bookshop, print your own books? So Jimmy did just that. It was a side interest for him, and it was open in London for a number of years, so that he could, from what I understand, he put a lot of work into it, made it a really beautiful, kind of a Gothic place. And he owned it for a while, and he printed his own books. So it was once again a manifestation of his interest in the occult and how he wanted to have that. The guy had the money, and he had that side interest and fascination with it. So why not, perpetuate that?
Right, and I think he published a version of the Goetia. So Crowley had also published a version of that. So he's kind of keeping that tradition. Did you ever hear of the cult kind of house that Page bought? I don't know if I recollect if it's in your book. It was made by a Mason, and he really wanted it. He bought it in the 70s. I can't remember the name of it now. The Charter House. Does that sound right?
I'm not familiar with that one, William, and I don't want to kind of I don't want to comment on it. But yeah. I will say that the two books that Jimmy had published, one was an astrology book and one was the other book that I'm not going to mention. You mentioned the name of it. But yes, those were the only two that supposedly Jimmy published through the Equinox store. And curiously enough, potent books, that's for sure.
Yeah, Goetia for certain. Very dangerous. Yeah, very dangerous type of magic. Yeah. So you talk about the curse. I mean, I know, do you ever read about Page attending the 100th year reception for the Book of the Law in Egypt in 1904? Do you ever hear that one?
I haven't, but Jimmy's been, seen wearing OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis t-shirts, and and he was in Egypt for sure. That's a potent place, the Sphinx and the pyramids. The Egyptian magic is, with all of the curse magic the Egyptians did. So there's quite a rich history there. But I haven't. It's really hard to track information like that down and be very definitive with it, because unless you have a picture or an article, placing these people in certain places. They have access; they can travel anywhere, and they don't leave as much breadcrumb wise as people would these days with social media. So
That's true. I mean, Page, what is in his 70s? He's got to be almost 80. I mean, he made it through a very intense drug spell. There's pictures of him during his heroin phase where he could not be over 100 pounds.
oh, he just looked so scraggly, and this in that like '77 tour, he was a real mess.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's 76 now. He's got a 30-year-old girlfriend, and the girlfriend is friends with Scarlett. Scarlett, actually, his daughter, does photography for his 30-year-old girlfriend, so they're friends. And his girlfriend's a poet, and Jimmy funds her poetic endeavors. So everybody seems happy and harmonious. Jimmy's 76. He's got a good life. He's got mega bucks, but he cannot go on tour as Led Zeppelin. He wants to badly, but Robert Plant refuses to allow it.
Really? Why? Do you know why that is?
I think Plant blames Jimmy for what happened to the band, John Bonham, potentially his son. I found something where it was quoted by one of the newspapers after Bonham died that Robert Plant blames Jimmy's interest in the occult for what happened. I can't confirm that, but I do know there's stuff online where he was quoted by a reporter as having said that through a second or third source. There's always been tension between those guys. That's one thing I really stand firm with. I can see the tension when they do interviews. How can you blame Robert Plant? Most of the bad stuff happened to him, and I think he holds it against Jimmy, even though they have this kind of polite, we're old bandmates. They don't tour again. Plant has his own very successful solo career. He does his own thing with Alison Krauss.
Right.
John Paul Jones is really a talented guy and such a nice guy, and he does so much just kind of in the background musically. They both have had very fruitful music careers after 1980, whereas Jimmy, considering his immense talent, has not done a whole lot. And Anger's Curse was all about not killing him, not hurting him, but the Curse of King Midas is about creating illness or creative impotence. And then we know King Midas, everything he touched turned to gold. Jimmy has got megabucks, and so everything he touched did turn to gold afterwards. But also creatively, Jimmy has been stunted. All he wants to do, and he said through the media for years, if only Robert would agree, we'd go on tour again. Jimmy wants that energy. He doesn't want the money. He wants the feeling of traveling again and reliving those days as Led Zeppelin. And Robert Plant, you need the lead singer. And Plant says, nope, we'll do a one-off show here and there, as they have done periodically, but there's no touring, there's no new music, nothing. And I think Plant holds it against him, and he says, nope, not going to happen, dude. And I really believe that.
That's really fascinating. Because what has Page really achieved since 1980, since Bonham passed away? So,
well, I mean, yeah, some people will say, oh, he's done this and this. He's did the Death Wish soundtrack, and he's collaborated with the Black Crowes. He's done little bits and pieces, but for somebody like that, he could have had such an amazing, second career after Zeppelin, and it didn't happen. It did not happen. So who knows? Based on the way the Curse is structured, it seemed to have worked. I don't know. Maybe not.
Oh, it's really a mysterious band. I'm so influential, super influential. Still listen to all those songs today on the radio, but just with Bonham, Bonham drank 40 shots of vodka before noon or something like that, and that was it.
It was out of control. Yeah, they were rehearsing at Bray Studios in England, and Jimmy had bought he bought the old mill house after Plumpton Place when there was an OD death there. They moved to the old mill house that Michael Caine had owned, and then they, after rehearsals, after Bonham had 40 shots of vodka that day, they slept over at Jimmy's new house, because it was close by, and then that's when they woke up, and Bonham had choked on his own vomit, and that was it. Yeah.
But he was on a tear, though, right? It wasn't like it was a matter of time. That's my understanding about Bonham.
Yeah, I mean, you could go either way. You could say rock and roll lifestyle, and people drank and did drugs, and those things happen. So this curse, people could say the curse is nonsense. Sure, I can agree with that. I'm not saying the curse is or isn't true. It's just something to consider. But I also think, from my understanding with the occult, is that when you have that kind of energy swirling around you, everybody has their weakness or their predisposition to certain behavior. Jimmy was hooked on heroin Bonham was already an alcoholic, but I think that the energy that was swirling around them or directed at them certainly exacerbated Bonham's alcoholism. He was susceptible to that, and I think that's part of the reason why he just overdid it and died. Who knows? I mean, you can't really prove. It can't be proven or disproven, but it's food for thought, and it's a compelling story.
Well, Lance, we are at 40 minutes. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything I missed? Where's the best place for people to buy the book?
Oh yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, Amazon.com, paperback or Kindle, and you can check out excerpts from the book on my website, lancegilbert.net. And yeah, it's a compelling story as long as you head into it with an open mind. I'm certainly not saying that this is or isn't true, but there are certain circumstances, events that occurred, and then there supposedly were outcomes, and people can draw their own conclusions. It's just something that's a neat story to consider.
Well, it is definitely very mysterious events all come together, and probably one of the world's most famous bands. Again, the title of the book is The Led Zeppelin Curse, Jimmy Page and the Haunted Boleskine House by Lance Gilbert. Lance Gilbert, thank you so much.
Hey, William, I really appreciate it. Wonderful time. And hey, your podcast is fabulous. So I hope people listen to this and other ones, and happy to come back on at some point in the future.
Awesome. Great. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. So if people are listening right now, do me a favor, go to iTunes. If you like the show, give a 5-star review, share this episode with your friends and family. And, I'm in the top 1.5% of podcasts around the world. So please share this around. I'd appreciate it. But thanks a lot, Lance. Take care.